Nour, I want to start with you. I'm curious, what can a company like Tarjama, working on Arabic language models really offer that sort of the big guys, OpenAI or Anthropic or Google can't? Why is it important to create these local language LLMs?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me here. So when we talk about Arabic language is not one main language. So we have many dialects. And if you look at the internet, so all these large language models crawled mainly the internet, right? Got all the data from the internet. Arabic language is the fourth maybe spoken language on the internet, and it's only 4% from data. So we don't have a lot of high quality data sets online. Most of the data sets that are of high quality that could potentially feed any model sitting behind walls, right? They're in companies that are like ours or others. So eventually when you look at any of the existing models today, they're quite good, advanced drastically from the days of when Google started to when OpenAI launched and all these other models racing continuously to improve. The one issue that we continuously face is when we are translating different culture or nuance, and you basically need to fix grammar or a specific kind of culture, and that data is not online, you end up needing human in the loop. So that's why continuously you need models that are improving with like high quality data sets. And this is why a lot of companies are today racing against building data sets and data companies and structuring data is because, and then adding all these humans that can continuously improve these models. So eventually when it comes to Arabic language, as Arabic.ai, what we're focusing mainly on is solving complex problems that's related to Arabic. One is how do you extract data from all these data sets that are archived on, and you need OCR to extract. Right. And when it comes to OCR,
so you're actually creating the data sets.
Exactly.
Themselves. The data doesn't exist. You have to create the data to train the model.
Absolutely.
Got it. I want to broaden this out to talk a little bit about AI sovereignty more generally and bring in Anjney and Bill. There's a lot of talk, a lot of countries out there say we need AI sovereignty, we want to have AI sovereignty, but how achievable is that really, given you have these few hyperscalers that control most of the data centers and the cloud, you have a few of these big model companies that everybody seems to be using. Anj, I'll go to you first. How achievable do you think AI sovereignty really is, or is it sort of a distraction?
It's a good question. It's a hard one to reason about in the abstract, but basically, is sovereignty possible? Absolutely. But the way I kind of think about it is, which part of the stack is sovereignty critical for, and then which one do you have a reasonable shot at actually unlocking? So, a simple way to break it down would be, you've got the chip stack, you've got your infra stack of software, and then you have the model layer, and now you have agents that are built on top of the models. And you're right, it is extraordinarily hard and getting even harder for nations to do their own frontier pre-training, right? On the other hand, relative to a year ago, all the prognostication was that there was no shot they would have.
Right.
And in reality, the open source ecosystem has ended up being quite vibrant. And we have China to thank that, right. For that a lot. I think DeepSeek changed everything. So I think there's at least at the model layer, the picture is looking a lot more possible for nations. There's base models that they can pick and then do the last mile customization on their local values, their cultural norms, like we were just talking about with translation. And so it is possible. I think what's much harder is the chip stack, right? Because if you need frontier chips to train models, which are increasingly much more demanding workloads, as a country, if you don't have a shot at building your own 2-nanometer, chip fabrication supply chain within a few years, which basically there are only 2 countries today that can do that, you're best off partnering. Right. And so I think sovereignty is kind of, I sort of reason about it at every layer, and the part that I think has changed the most is the foundation model layer. And I do think that countries now, the ones that at least that have invested in building out compute infrastructure where they own the chips, they host them, and then they can run the models in ways that they can align, that's where the world is going. And I think that's become non-negotiable.
Interesting. And Bill, I'm curious what your thought is on this idea of AI sovereignty. Do you think it's achievable?
I do think it is achievable. I definitely think that people care so much about preserving their culture that that's a very important part.
Right.
Think about where we are in time right now. Clearly, everybody knows how transformative this is. I think people will look back on 2025, or maybe this decade for sure, as a turning point in civilization, probably like BC and AD. We'll look at this turning point like that. So the whole knowledge of humanity is being absorbed, and preserving those cultural components in sovereign AI, I think, is going to be important. My whole goal is to try and make it be fair. So to try and give attribution properly to
I know,
people.
Bill, you're working on one of the most pressing problems out there for many companies, particularly in this business we're in, publishing or content creation, which is, you have these models that have been trained on all this content, essentially taken without permission. And now a lot of companies are worried about, well, how do I get paid for the content I have? It costs something for me to produce it. It's highly disruptive to my business model. How do I create a new business model? And so you're working on attribution. Can you talk a little bit about how this works with ProRata?
Yes, well, imagine a world where anybody with an idea, anywhere on Earth, whether it's a paragraph or a song or a design, architect, anything, can contribute that to AI, and then when it's used by others, can be attributed and compensated. Well, in the past, that wasn't even remotely possible, but with AI, it actually is. You can use the models themselves to track down where the components came from, sort of unscramble the egg of the output, and then give proper attribution. So we've developed a technology to do that. Now we just have to convince all the AI companies that they want to do that they should do that. But I definitely feel that if we can make that happen.
How's that bit going?
So far, we've only gotten small AI companies to do it, but we're working our way up the chain to the bigger ones. But lawsuits are changing things, for sure. The Anthropic settlement of $1.5 billion to the book publishers is one movement. Other laws are being created. But I think that the real thing that will make it happen is not laws and not lawsuits. I think the real thing that will make it happen is the AI that uses content fairly will have better answers. And therefore, competition will make it happen eventually.
Okay, interesting. And to make this work, do you need access to the model weights and activations?
No, you can look purely at the output itself and figure out where things came from. That's the important part. Because sometimes the weights themselves don't tell you where it came from because of the way they're statistically creating the answers. So we feel it's very important to try and make AI fair to all, because this is now going to be the starting point for people's discovery of everything. AI is taking over search, it's taking over shopping, it's taking over everything. So I think it's very important to me.
Interesting. So you talked a little bit about the Anthropic lawsuit and the effect that may have. A lot of people are hoping that there'll be some regulation around this technology as well. And Nour, I wanted to come to you. I mean, what would you like to see in terms of regulation and governance of this technology? And how do you think that may sort of shape the landscape going forward for who the winners are going to be in this new world?
So I think we see two worlds when it comes to regulation. We see the US and maybe like Europe, where it's over-protected with GDPR, where innovation got a little bit stalled. I think in order to have a balance, let's say, innovation, where you don't have full innovation without any of at least somehow regulations, we see definitely copyright is one of the main issues, is how do you protect the publishers or the writers or any contributors to AI. Then we need to see some protections on models, or let's say, for example, how do you govern a model when you use some of these APIs? How do we make sure that there is data protection?
Right. Are you worried that some of those larger players might distill off of your model, and then they get to say, oh, I offer this great Arabic language capability, but they didn't create it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That could possibly happen. And then when you deploy on-prem a model for a customer, despite having like, and you said actually something, Anjney, that's very important when you said about data sovereignty. We have all the hyperscalers, most of them in the region, operating on data sovereignty. Not everything, it's semi-data sovereignty, right? We all know that. So when you deploy a model on-prem, in our case, let's say for clients that really care about data sovereignty, you're technically giving away your model IP to them.
Right.
How do you make sure that this model does not get reverse engineered, right? These are things that we need to like care about, worry about, and I don't think they're governed yet or protected.
Interesting. Anjney, I want to come to you. I think we last connected, it was around the time of the Paris AI Action Summit, which was an interesting moment sort of for global AI governance, a kind of shift from this focus on AI safety to looking at maybe regulation that would be more sort of in favor of innovation and growth. How are you guys looking at this currently at A16Z? Is there, I think, certain members of your firm have been very pro, let's not have any regulation. It's way too early to regulate this technology. But I'm curious how you come down on this issue.
You're right. Paris was a complete shelling point where things changed 180 degrees. And the Paris Action Summit was about a month after when DeepSeek came out. So it was, I would say it was a double whammy effect, right? What had happened was right before then, there was this like statewide explosion in the United States for state-by-state legislation. The Biden executive order about 12 months before that was a bit of a starting gun where the previous administration said, AI is important, something must be done, go figure it out. And that kicked off such a mess of statewide legislation where everybody was trying to propose different things that we were just staring down what was happening to entrepreneurs where they had literally to play whack-a-mole with different states. What's changed since Paris is one unified federal framework. There was an AI action plan that the current administration put out, and I think that's fantastic for the US. It hasn't solved the problem entirely that there's still a bunch of statewide, piece-by-piece regulatory approach, but at least now there's a strong federal message that says these are the issues that matter to the country, and those will be figured out at the federal level. And that's shaping actually the way Europe approaches it too, because prior to that, there was a country-by-country mess as well, and I think the EU Commission is trying at least to unify that. So that was one big thing that's been great. I think what has not been great is that the speed at which the open source ecosystem has been has accelerated the race geopolitically is not looking great for the United States and its allies. The reality is if you look at the most powerful models that are open source today, outside of Mistral from France and a couple of models that are small sort of specialized models from the US, it's really China's game right now.
Right.
And I think that's not a particularly encouraging picture.
Interesting.
One thing I would say about that, I agree with you, is that China has unleashed a lot of competitive juices around the world because of that.
Oh, absolutely.
I remember I was in Davos when DeepSeek came out,
Yeah.
Right.
and stocks took a hit, like
Yeah.
a $1 trillion hit.
Absolutely.
And they've all come back, and more than that since then.
Right.
But the number of U.S. competitors that are, I think, upping their game because of that is a truism, and I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, I think that entrepreneurs, researchers who have the skill set to push the frontier should be spending their time on pushing the frontier of capabilities, not on navigating 50 different pieces of legislation.
Right.
And that was the status quo a year ago.
Yeah.
And I think what you're going to see as a result of all that freed up mind space of these entrepreneurs and scientists is that 3, 4, 5 months from now, you're going to start to see a wave of open weight models from American labs, from allied labs in the West, that now are going to level set, or sort of level the playing field.
Do you think the West is going to come back when it comes to open
I
source?
believe.
All right.
I believe. And
Bill, I want to go to Bill on it's very interesting, the technology you're working on. I do think, this is a critical problem for content creators, publishers, and also, commerce platforms to some extent. But there's still this fundamental issue of okay, my information may have contributed to the answer I'm getting from this LLM, but it may not have contributed that much. And how much am I going to get paid for that? And there's still the fundamental problem of I'm losing that direct relationship that I used to have to my customer, to my reader, to my audience. When you've talked to publishers about this, how are they thinking about this? And because that still seems to be a fundamental problem. Yes, I can get a little bit of, I'm so glad I'm going to earn, 15 cents from that answer, but that's not nearly as much as I used to get from the subscription that this person used to pay for. So how are you dealing with publishers around this issue of disintermediation?
Well, there's two different parts to your question. The first part is, can you have fair pay and make enough money from sharing your content in AI engines? And I give the examples of Spotify and YouTube and the App Store. Those all share revenue, and they pay out billions and billions of dollars to people. Apple News pays out billions of dollars to publishers. So you can make a very good living with your content being used somewhere else. So and Spotify is a perfect example in that they have $20 billion in revenue. They pay out $12 billion to artists, and they're a $100 billion market cap profitable company. So proving that a model of sharing can exist and make a company work. The other part of your question of how am I being disintermediated? So this just came up with OpenAI and Walmart and Amazon. OpenAI is doing direct commerce inside of the product, and Walmart said, I would like to be in that, and Amazon said, I don't want to be in that. So Walmart says, I want to be where the conversations are happening. It's too important to me, even though I'll be disintermediated and I can't do upsell and other things. And Amazon says, no, I don't want to be part of it because I need my experience to be the way it is. Obviously, for different companies and different brands, both can work. But I do think that AI is going to be the storefront for all of human exploration and knowledge. And if you're not in it, you're going to be missing out. You're not going to be in the store.
Interesting.
So I think it's going to be important to be there.
Right. Anj, I want to come to you before we're out of time again. There's a sense that certain parts of the stack are really locked up. We've got, we've got some really big players on the frontier models. We've got some really big players, in infrastructure. We've got a number of companies at the application layer. Where are you seeing that there's still opportunity to invest? Where are you seeing the biggest opportunity at the moment?
We're entering a golden age, an explosion of new frontier teams. I think it was very popular 2 or 3 years ago to say, there's only going to be 3 or 4 labs and teams that are going to do any real training. This is going to go to the big tech companies, and startups will have to deal with the God models are going to win, and startups will be left to pick the pieces up of tiny little, niche opportunities here and there. What's changed the game entirely is the advent of reasoning models about a year ago. Reinforcement learning as a new paradigm is working so extraordinarily well, especially on mission-critical problems. So a year ago, right, if you looked at what AI was really good at, I'm talking about sort of frontier generative AI, it was creative writing, companionship, where hallucination was a feature, not a bug, which was great. It was great for creativity, it was great for a bunch of consumer use cases, but when it came to mission-critical problems, defense, healthcare, enterprise problems where 9 nines of reliability is important, it just failed. And now we've got reinforcement learning where if you can define the reward model correctly, which startups are really good at doing when they embed themselves inside an industry. They go deep, they go vertical, and they end up understanding the customer's problem end to end. That's an entirely new, you can build entirely new multi-billion-dollar companies doing full end-to-end reinforcement learning for each industry.
That's great. I'm so sorry we're out of time, but thank you so much for listening. This has been a great session. Thank you so much.